Welcome back to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by Grok Media LLC and GraniteGrok.com. We've got some great news on the green energy front, as in less of it. The White House is now removing vast swaths of public land and making it no longer available for green energy because they've decided, well, you know what? It's public land. These special cutouts for these green energy companies are actually not good for the American people. We'll talk about that and more. GrokTALK starts in less than 60 seconds. New Hampshire Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte has been making a lot of noise about how she's funding education. The Republican budget she just signed provides more money for education than ever before. She even bragged the other day that New Hampshire is top 10 in the country when it comes to funding our children's education, as if giving money to school systems has anything to do with learning. If you look at the math, and if you got schooled in New Hampshire, the odds are good it's not your best subject. It's the exact opposite. The more money we throw at schools, the less kids learn. We're committed to wasting money on an experiment that failed, unless wasting money to drive parents to homeschool their kids was the goal. We prefer to pick on Democrats, lower hanging fruit and all that, but our rhetorical woodshed doesn't discriminate. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Grok, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you. All right, welcome to a great conversation on wind energy, mostly because that's near and dear to our heart here in New Hampshire in the Northeast and the Gulf of Maine, where they've been attempting to bum rush wind. In 2024, that's exactly what they did. The Biden administration pushed through with a lot of pressure and probably a good amount of money, wind farm leases at the end of last year, trying to get it all done before the election. So in the event that President Trump won, which he did, those things would all be in place and in motion. But they've got some problems. We've been talking about it for a while. Ever since President Trump got elected, there's been a lot of talk about how he is going to put an end to all these offshore wind farms, especially the ones that haven't even been started yet. And lucky for us, the Gulf of Maine project hasn't been started yet. And the breaking new news is, and we'll read this from AP, Jennifer McDermott, July 31st, 2025, the Trump administration is canceling plans to use large areas of federal waters for new offshore wind development, the latest steps to suppress an industry in the United States that he doesn't like very much. More than 3.5 million acres has been designated wind energy areas, the offshore locations deemed most suitable for wind energy development, of which there are actually none. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is now rescinding all designated wind energy areas in federal waters, announcing on Wednesday an end to setting aside large areas for speculative wind development, the Gulf of Maine being one of them. Some of them have already been leased. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But that's the first story, and this is a topic we've covered for a very long time. We have over 200 articles on wind energy and specifically the Gulf of Maine at GraniteGrok.com. I hope you go visit there and check some things out. And, hey, donate while you're there because we live and breathe on donations, and you can help us stay in business. So the Gulf of Maine has traditionally been a very fragile environment. Ask any environmentalist. Look it up online. The Gulf of Maine is fragile. They're very worried about the Gulf of Maine, and it's been getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And oh my God, the surface water temperatures are not even as warm as 1920. But, that's CO2. What can I tell you? So anyway, the fragile Gulf of Maine had an opportunity to become something of a real estate deal. Like, we could make a whole bunch of money. Maine could make money. Massachusetts could make money. For some reason, New Hampshire wasn't going to make any money, and we weren't going to get any wind energy either, but that's a story for a different day. So here's the deal. We have the fragile Gulf of Maine, and they rushed through these leases last year. And now it looks like, and we've tried to prop people's spirits up ever since Trump was elected by saying, look, it sounds like he's going to get in the way. And one of the things they're doing is they're saying that, well, we want to make sure that when they pushed all these leases through, that they crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's and did all this good stuff. If they didn't follow the law, according to the law, they could, in theory, rescind or revoke leases that were already given. So we're looking at that from Doug Burgum, Department of Interior, curbs preferential treatment for wind energy. dated 7/29. Today, U.S. Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum announced 4 policy measures to advance President Donald J. Trump's common sense approach to affordable, reliable energy development in America. In alignment with President Trump's directives, the Department of the Interior is ending special treatment for unreliable energy sources such as wind. This includes evaluating whether to stop onshore wind development on some federal lands and halting future offshore wind lease sales. The department will also study how constructing and operating wind turbines might affect migratory bird populations. Most of our reporting is focused on mammals, sea mammals, dolphins, whales, seals. We have numerous reports and a detailed accounting of all the dead carcasses that have washed ashore in the last few years where wind has been developed. So that's also a consideration. There's a serious environmental angle here where they're saying, you know what, you rushed through this process. You didn't do the environmental impacts that are required by law thoroughly enough, and we're going to go back and do that. And if they discover that it is detrimental to the local wildlife, they can just say, sorry, we're not doing it anymore. So the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is basically in charge of, as part of the Department of Interior for wind, had their own little statement, 7/30/2025. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, today announced it is rescinding all designated wind energy areas, WEAs, on the U.S. Outer Continental Shelf, the OCS. This action is being taken in accordance with Secretary Order SO 3437, ending preferential treatment for unreliable foreign-controlled energy sources in department decision-making, and the Presidential Memorandum of January 20, 2025, temporary withdrawal of all areas of the OCS from offshore wind leasing, and review of the federal government's leasing and permitting practices for wind. Again, wind was given special deferential treatment. If you remember, I believe it was Utah, they wanted to build a train, a railway, to carry oil from Canada or northern Utah down state so that they could get it into the mainstream, into a pipeline or into a processing plant or whatever it was. And the environmental groups were like, oh, you can't do that. This will happen to the environment and that'll happen to the environment. And you've heard this story a million times before. If it comes to nuclear or coal or a gas pipeline or any kind of energy that's actually affordable, abundant, and useful, they get in the way. And they tie it up in court for 10, 15, 20 years, as long as it takes until it's no longer ever going to be profitable to do whatever that was. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that, you know what? It doesn't apply. The environmental impact of the rail had nothing to do with the environmental impact of the oil. It's like saying just because you're a train and you carry some kind of material, it doesn't mean you're responsible for how that material gets used later on. So anyway, a train track's getting built. I really that's like a bad summary of that, but you can read it online at GrokTALK as well. So BOEM, at the behest of the Interior Department, run by Doug Burgum, who answers to President Donald Trump, has said, you know what, there are long-range environmental complications and harms as a result of green energy, which is true, solar and wind. So he's saying, Mr. President said this, I'm saying that, and we aren't going to just let you use federal land for wind and solar because there's really other better uses for it. Some of other minerals, perhaps, that you might take advantage of. And so AP, again, this is Matt Daly, July 17th. This was earlier in the month. He's talking about enhanced oversight on clean energy projects aimed at ending preferential treatment of unreliable, subsidy-dependent wind and solar energy. Again, also foreign-controlled in many cases, and we're going to get to that locally in a second. The Interior Department said in a statement Tuesday the order will ensure all evaluations are thorough and deliberative on potential projects on millions of acres of federal lands and offshore areas, the department said. Clean energy advocates said the action could hamstring projects that need to be underway quickly to qualify for federal tax credits that are set to expire under the Tax and Cut Spending Bill. That President Trump, this coffee's giving me hiccups, which is really strange. I think I know how to drink after 60-something years. The President Trump signed into law on July 4th. The law phases out credits for wind, solar, and other renewable energy while enhancing federal support for fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. Again, support for energy that's actually useful and, as we'll read in a few minutes, much more productive given the amount of land it takes if you're looking at land per megawatt hours. So we have a little story for that later. at the time when energy demand is skyrocketing, adding more layers of bureaucracy and red tape for energy projects at the Interior Department is exactly the wrong approach, said Stephanie Bosch, Senior Vice President of the Solar Energy Industries Association. This was not a concern of hers at all, nor is it now if we're talking about developing nuclear, hydro, natural gas pipelines, and power plants. They don't give a crap about that stuff. They're only interested in their little thing. They're not concerned about energy. They're not concerned about reliability. They're not concerned about on-demand need. They're very happy with rolling blackouts and, hey, don't charge your EV, even though we told you had to buy an EV. So Mr. Burgum, Secretary Burgum, has another announcement. It's order to rein in environmentally damaging wind and solar projects. There's lots of these out there today. Under the law, the department must consider reasonable alternatives to proposed projects and make land use decisions, both onshore and offshore, that are judicious. These laws ultimately raise the question of whether the use of federal lands for wind and solar projects is permissible, given these projects' encroachment on other land uses and their disproportionate land requirements, especially when reasonable project alternatives with higher capacity densities are technically and economically feasible. This is what I just talked about. You have a certain amount of land. What can you get out of it? What can you use it for to create the best possible result? So, based on data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, one advanced nuclear plant produces 33.17 megawatts per acre, while one offshore wind farm produces approximately 0.006 megawatts per acre, which is approximately 5,500 times less efficient than one nuclear plant. Thus, when there are reasonable project alternatives that can generate the same amount of or more energy on far less federal land, wind and solar projects may unnecessarily and unduly degrade federal land. Yes, there is some talk about selling some of that federal land back to the states in which it exists. That's also a great idea, and then they can use it for whatever they want. So locally, we've had this, like I said, going on for more than a year, 2 years probably. The ramming through of wind projects in the Gulf of Maine, of which they issued a handful of leases. Avangrid Renewables LLC, Invenergy NE Offshore Wind, Maine Research Lease, doing business as Pine Tree Offshore Wind. And those are the ones that are closest to us. So I will share this map on the video in post-production. So those companies, you got to find the thing I was just going to read. And we've been working with some fishermen. We've published some op-eds from them and really tried to help them out because, they don't want this. The regular boaters don't want it. A small group of people with oversized influence wanted it. So those are the people who are upset. Just about everybody else loves this. So this is from the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association, which is a group that coalesced as a result of the Gulf of Maine wind ramming through of the lease plan. So this is the statement of NEFSA COO Dustin Delano on BOEM removal of designated offshore wind energy areas, the WEAs. Today makes a great step forward for America's fishermen, coastal communities, and marine ecosystems. For years, fishermen have fought against overregulation and seen the decline of many communities. All of this has happened while foreign green energy companies were given rushed lease area approvals and free handouts. We're thankful President Trump and his administration have prioritized the American fisheries over foreign mega companies. BOEM's removal of offshore wind areas that haven't been leased yet is a step in the right direction on returning our oceans back to fishermen and ecosystems. Now, he has to be very clear about that because that's exactly what it says. But as you've heard from the things that I've read in the moments previous to this, that's not all they're looking at. They are looking at everything. They want very much to be clear. And they're using, it's amusing, isn't it? They're using the environmental angle. You guys kind of rush this. These wildlifes and ecosystems in the biosphere, they're at risk. And we think you just kind of skip some stuff. And if we can find proof of that, and they can because they did rush it, they rammed this crap through, they can step back and say, all right, well, we have to do this over. We can't just, which is why they've paused all of that stuff. And so part of the problem with that, and I think I have these tabs out of order. So while I go look, let's see, you don't need that one. You get to listen to me talk to you while I do this. Okay, here we go. Developer halts negotiations for Gulf of Maine floating wind farm. Here's why. This is from Seacoast Online, one of our local New Hampshire communist newspapers. 3 years after they began negotiations over a proposed power contract on an offshore floating wind farm in the Gulf of Maine have come to an abrupt halt, with the developer citing recent shifts in the energy landscape that have in particular caused uncertainty in offshore wind. Pine Tree Offshore Wind LLC has requested that talks be temporarily suspended. So they're like, well, we're not going to set money aside to invest in this project because, we're in charge of development and everything's in the air. And everything is up in the air, and that's a good thing. So they're not going to do anything with that. They're going to put it on hold. The Maine PUC staff is like, oh, yeah, well, I guess we understand why, given the fact that, these things are happening. But it's not just their fault. Maine, in 2024, was trying to get a contract for federal grants for Sears Island. I don't know, there's a refuge there, and they wanted to create a facility to onboard power from these wind farms. I mean, they're out in the ocean. You got to run cables. You need a facility to take it in. You need battery storage facilities, and all that crap was going to happen on this nice little island. It's very quaint, and remember writing about it. It had a wildlife sanctuary on it of some sort, and they wanted to take a big chunk of it so they could bring power in from wind farms that didn't exist yet. Well, Biden's Department of Energy, I believe it was, said, no, we're not giving it to you. So they didn't even get the grant from Biden. Now, if you can't onshore the power, there's no reason to put the windmills out, floating, whatever. So they were kind of stuck. So this is another part of that. The Pine Tree Offshore Wind lease area, which is the closest to Portland, which is where this Sears thing was, Sears Point or whatever it's called, and they were going to bring it on there. And now that was last year. That was before Trump, before he even won the election. So there's been a lot of things up in the air about all of this. They didn't know how they were going to get the power on board. There's no other place that's designated for that except for Massachusetts. Here's Maine's plan for specialized. This is the Port on Sears Island. This is what this is. Funding gap puts Maine's wind port plans in jeopardy. This is from last December. Maine's plan for a specialized offshore wind port on Sears Island appears to be in jeopardy after multiple failed attempts to secure federal funding for the project. President Donald Trump's open hostility to offshore wind also clouds the project's immediate future, along with the state's ambition to lead the industry in the Gulf of Maine. Maine Public. This is public radio, so NPR-ish kind of stuff, right? Oh, we're going to lose them. They lost their funding in September. So all you nice hippies in Maine, you got to fund Maine Public, or you're not going to have all this nonpartisan goodness that you rely on. So last November, the Maine Department of Transportation learned federal authorities had turned down its submission of a $16 million it needed to design and permit its planned wind terminal at Searsport. So that was gone before Trump. And moving along, where are we here? Okay, we did the developer thing. So the developer, which is Pine Tree Offshore Wind. Who the hell is Pine Tree Offshore Wind? Well, there's two different companies that, as I mentioned, Avangrid and this other one, that have renewable leases. Neither of them is an American company. Avangrid is owned by, well, let's do Pine Tree first. So Pine Tree is an affiliate of Diamond Offshore Wind. Diamond Offshore Wind is owned by Mitsubishi. Diamond Offshore Wind is an affiliate of Mitsubishi. Pine Tree Offshore Wind is an affiliate of Diamond. So it's not an American company. The other one, Avangrid, is owned by, it's a Spanish company, Iberdrola. Iberdrola, you may have heard that name before. Iberdrola is the Spanish green energy company who has been fingered specifically as responsible for the complete blackout of the Iberian Peninsula earlier this year. I believe it was earlier this year. Could have been late last year. Things are blending together. So we've got an energy company that blacked out an entire peninsula, which has purchased leases in the Gulf of Maine. They have OSCA 0562, if you care. And they haven't developed anything yet either because everything's on hold. I have not been able to find anything indicating that they're just sort of, I guess they're just sitting on their hands waiting to see where this is going to go. But neither of these companies is U.S. The materials that they're going to purchase to build these wind farms, if they were ever to be built, aren't American. And so they are all subject to this reevaluation by the Trump administration and Doug Burgum's Department of Interior to determine whether or not this is good for America. Is this a good use of our land? No. The definite upside is that any of the OCS offshore areas that were available no longer are. So if they haven't already issued a lease, they're not going to lease it, not as long as Mr. Trump or the MAGA Republicans are in charge of those kinds of decisions, which is great because, I actually do some boating out in that part of the Gulf, and I don't want to see giant windmills out there because they do kill seabirds and they do kill I don't know about sharks, sorry, dolphins and whales. Lots of deaths. All right, look, it's beautiful. We go out to watch the dolphins and whales. We don't go out to watch them die. So, all in all, a great deal. They're holding up all the projects that have already been leased, and they're going to reevaluate them for environmental considerations. And now, whether or not it's actually a viable and valuable use of the land area, given what we're supposed to be putting there. So, I would bet that there will be significant abandonment of these lease projects, that they will take money back for leases they paid to get out of these deals because the extra money that they used to get to make them even remotely viable is no longer available. The states would have to negotiate power plans. And as we've seen even last year in 2024, states like Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New York were all sort of negotiating with these companies, mostly New Jersey, I believe, and Maryland, and maybe Delaware. Don't hold me to that. Anyway, the power was going to be so expensive, even with the subsidies, that the governors were like, we can't do it. We're not going to sign these power plans. And if nobody's going to buy the power, they're not going to build them, which is awesome. And with energy prices coming down, realistically, as we expand our energy portfolio and develop natural, American, local fossil fuels, wind is not going to look good at all. Offshore wind's not going to look good, period. And solar can't compete. To be clear, if you own some land, like a lot of land, and you want to put solar on your roof or you want to put windmills on your land, it's your land. You pay for it. You pay for that. You use the energy you create. You work out a deal to sell whatever extra power you have at the lowest wholesale price. I am not paying extra for your green energy fantasy, nor should anybody else have to pay extra for your green energy fantasy. So that's it. Good news for the Gulf of Maine. I think that all those posts I've written with the headlines, as Trump killed the Gulf of Maine wind farm, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of them. Just search Gulf of Maine plus wind on GrokTALK.com, and you'll see all of those. We've got a lot of articles by other interested parties, individuals who were involved in trying to stop the Gulf of Maine wind lease process, which we didn't successfully do, but did after the fact by helping to elect President Trump. So, good news for New England and the world when it comes to energy, because America is in the real energy business again, and hopefully, you never know, all those crazy judges, we'll be able to see some energy prices come down, some domestic mineral development improve, and things will get a lot better and a little bit cheaper. So that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed my whirlwind nonstop, almost talking endlessly about wind. And next week we'll be back, hopefully, with guests. This is Steve from GrokTALK. We're out of here.